All right, so this morning, I want us to begin by thinking a little bit about those times in our lives, those things that have happened in our lives that we'd really like just to keep private. Those secret things, embarrassing moments, whatever they may be, that we just like, we'd be better off leaving them in here, not getting them out, because people might think of us a little differently, see us a little differently, perceive us a little different, and I just don't want to go there, so we're gonna keep them in. Moments in our lives, things like that. Thinking about that for a few moments, I'll get us started. Several years ago, we were on vacation with friends, and we were at the beach, and we decided to come off the beach over to the pool, and they had a nice big pool here and a lazy river over here, and some were over here, and a lot of us were around the pool, and one of the guys with us, he was kind of by the poolside, and I got this idea, and I don't know what it is with me. Maybe you're the same way. You go away, you go on vacation, the shoulders drop, you just be more of who you really are, right? And then, again, you don't want that to get out because people might think you differently. But, you're just relaxed, you're having fun. And so I'm sitting there, and I got this random idea that I'm just going to go charging at him. And if you've ever been to a pool, you'll know that typically it gets wet around the outer perimeter. Just naturally that happens, at a pool. And so it was the case there. So I go flying at him, and I hit the wet, and my feet go up above my head, and down I go. I think I did knock him in. And my momentum kind of just rolled me into the water. And so I begin to sink. And those moments when you just really begin to reflect on what just happened? And those moments under the water, I'm thinking, boy, I hope nobody saw that. I really hope nobody. Is really embarrassing. I just missed hitting my head. How do I get out of this? If I get over to this far corner, I can get up and go, and nobody will see me. And all these things are going in my mind, and just really trying to feel out how this is going to work. And I came to the conclusion, it happened so quick, nobody really saw it. And so about 10 seconds later, I surface, and sure enough, I have got a pretty good audience waiting to congratulate me. And of course, you're embarrassed. What do you say? Difficult situation. We've all maybe been there. I've been there more than I care to remember. One of the things I think we all can possibly agree on is the fact that no two people are the same. They're different identity, different DNA, different personalities, different likes, dislikes, things like that. Not all two people are the same. But yet, one thing we all do share, and Paul talks about this in Romans chapter 3 when he said, all of us, every single one of us have sinned, and we all have fallen short of God's glorious standard. We all have fallen. We all have done that thing. We all have that secret, and God wants to bring us back. He wants to build our identity around something different. We want our image to remain unscathed. We want our identity to be in such a way that I really identifies with other people, and they'll identify with us, and it won't turn them off. Jesus was speaking into these types of things with people on the mountainside that we looked at last week. You remember he goes up onto the side of this mountain. All of these people come around, and he begins to talk about things that were very shocking to them, completely unexpected. Like, what do you really know what I've been through, Jesus? And he knows that, and he's speaking into them. And then in Matthew 6, he changes gears a little bit, and he starts talking about this comparison game. And he's telling these people, don't be comparing yourself to them. Don't be chasing after this. Don't be chasing and pursuing them. And let's pick it up here in Matthew chapter 6, just the first 6 verses. Jesus says this. He says, watch out. Don't do your good deeds publicly to be admired by others, for you will lose the reward from your Father in heaven. When you give to someone in need, don't do it as the hypocrites do, blowing trumpets in the synagogues and streets and call attention to their acts of charity. I tell you the truth, they have received all of the reward they will ever get. But when you give to somebody in need, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Give your gifts in private, and your Father who sees everything will reward you. When you pray, don't be like the hypocrites who love to pray publicly on street corners and the synagogues where everyone can see them. I tell you the truth, that is all the reward they will ever get. But when you pray, go away by yourself, shut the door behind you, and pray to your Father in private. Then your Father, who sees everything, will reward you. What Jesus is doing here, and he does it all throughout the New Testament, and even we see it in the Old Testament, is this idea, this battle of hypocrisy versus authenticity. In other words, what he's saying is, does the private you match up with the public you? Does the Sunday morning you match up with the Monday through Saturday you? In other words, are we coming in Sunday mornings and we're almost becoming, getting re-energized? We're being around other like believers. We're worshiping together, singing together, praying together, talking together, getting re-energized, new tools in the toolbox, so to speak. And are we taking that with us Monday through Saturday? Or are we the same? Hypocrisy versus authenticity. Paul spoke into this and ran with this theme in 2 Corinthians when he says, so all of you have had the veil or the mask removed and can see and reflect the glory of the Lord. And the Lord, who is the Spirit, makes us more and more like him as we are changed into his glorious image. In other words, as we pour into him and we lean into him and we chase after him, the Bible says, and Paul writes, we're becoming more and more like him. Last week we talked about the past that we've had, running from it, and how so many times in our lives, and Satan will do this, make us, force us, move us in the direction of allowing that to define us, to be who we are. Jesus is saying, no, that's an inaccurate image of what I've created and the identity I've created in you. In his book, True Faced, Bill Thrall says this. He says, all of us have read about concepts and strategies that have promised to change us, but we remain unchanged, and we know it. We fear that others are beginning to know. Oh, we've learned new vocabulary, and we can rearrange the lawn furniture of our behaviors, but deep inside, we know we're a little different than we were. We believe that if others could spend a moment inside, they would be disgusted by what they discover. We're appalled because we've already discovered it. And we are deeply afraid that they will discover the truth about us, so we pretend to be somebody we're not. And this hidden, pretend person disgusts us the most. We're starting to lose all hope that we can change. We suspect that that what we are missing is hidden from the understanding or ability to fix. We feel stuck in deep insecurity and shame. So we continue to bluff. We marshal all of our best appearances and smile a lot. And what's amazing about following Jesus is that we do not have to pretend. We just don't. Because Jesus created this rule, this hard and fast rule, again, that we see so much through Scripture, that no performance equals no pressure. No performance leads to no pressure. And sadly, we all have the pressures, or find that we're in the middle of the pressures of life and chasing, and we feel we have to perform. Calvin Miller, who's a pastor out in the Midwest, says, for most who live, hell is never knowing who they are. It's a powerful statement, because sadly that's true for so many of us. We don't know that, or we fail to know that God defines us and bases our identity not on our performance, but on his Son's. Jesus' work on the cross and in the tomb determines our value, and we don't have to perform. So there's no pressure to perform. Now, with any hard and fast rule, we know that there's always something that threatens that. And that's no different here. And we'll look at just a couple things. You may have more. I'm just going to narrow it down to three. Three things that I feel really threaten this idea of no performance leads to no pressure. And the first one is this. We'll call it pace of life. I mean, it seems like, we've said this already, it seems like we're chasing something. We're always out there trying to catch something, pursue something. And this pace of life is overtaking us. This man you see on the screen, his name is Meyer Friedman, and he's an American cardiologist, and he coined the phrase type A personality. And working with his colleague, R.H. Roseman, together they had this theory that linked our hurried life or our pace of life to an increased risk of heart attack. And he says this. He says, hurry is a sickness. It says continuous struggle and unremitting attempt to accomplish and achieve more and more things or participate in more and more events in less and less time. Frequently in the face of opposition, real or imagined, from other persons. That's true. At some point, trying to find that balance or ability to slow down. I mean, think about this. When was the last time you had a meal with your family? Together, all of you. It's something that we've really tried to hold on to in our own house, and that doesn't happen every single night. But at least several nights a week, we've tried to have that meal together, no devices, just our voices. How was your day, the good, the bad, the ugly, what's going on the rest of the week, and just be able to sit down and hear from one another. How often do we do that? Just slowing down. I was in the car coming here this morning. I got about a 20-minute drive, and very, very, very rarely am I ever driving anywhere without the radio on. It's just like a habit now. I've got to have it on. I've got to hear something going on, And I get in, and it was actually set to K-Love. I think Kim drove it last. So it was actually set to K-Love, and it wasn't working. I don't know if anybody experienced that. It was all static. And I was just not in the mindset to listen to talk radio or anything else, like heavy metal, Megadeth stuff. So I'm like pushing the button. I shut it off and turn it on as if that's really going to make a difference. And it's just not working. And I'm really agitated. I'm not even out of my driveway yet. And it's almost like God's saying, listen, stupid, you don't need it. I doubt he said stupid. I think I ad-libbed that part, but you get the point. And for 20 minutes, I drove without my radio on. This is a huge accomplishment for me. And just thinking a little bit about, what am I going to talk about this morning? But really, mainly just nothing. Just looking around and seeing God's glory. And just, honestly, it was pretty neat. And a lot of times we don't do that. When was the last time we actually got away from others and just spent some time listening? God says, be still and know that I am God. I remember a speaker once that I listened to. He had like 4 or 5 kids, and it was so hard for him at times to have that quiet moment, even moments with his wife. And so what he came to is he said, I would tell the kids, I'm going to my room. They knew what that meant. Leave me alone for the next 10, 15 minutes. He went to his room, locked the door. Usually lasted about 30 seconds, and the doors being, banging on the door and everything else. But trying to find that quiet time where he can just relax, be in the presence of God, and just put everything else on the back burner for a moment. We have adhered to a pace in our lives that's becoming unsustainable, and something has to give. And Jesus did not create us to race through life like that. He talks about this later in Matthew when he's saying, are you tired? You need to come to me. I'm going to give you rest. He says that I'm gentle, I'm humble at heart. Come, receive me. And then he finishes, and these verses in Matthew 11 where he says, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. And I really enjoy this translation of these verses, and you can see it on the screen there. It says in Matthew 11, are you tired? Are you worn out? Burned out on religion? Come to me, Jesus says. Get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. So this pace of life will alter. It will work against the no performance versus no pressure. Secondly, is this platform. We'll call it platform. In the social media arena, these people have come together and made millions and billions of dollars of creating platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram. It used to be MySpace. Whatever happened to MySpace, right? So ancient now. We're so old. And they created these platforms that allow us to communicate with people. Get to know others personally and corporately. Get to know ourselves. It's almost like saying, and you create your own platform. They give us the ability to do that as well, even on YouTube, make our own videos. And so it's like, they're saying if you aren't, people aren't praising you and uplifting you and taking great pictures of yourself and putting yourself out there, then do it yourself. Right? Take the selfies, do all this, make the videos, and you've got your own platform to be out there for everybody to see. It's almost contradictory to what Jesus said of being humble. Let other people build you up. Let other people talk highly of you, not yourself. But at any rate, that's what it is. And we've also taken that platform and put people on it, almost like a pedestal, and we begin chasing them. If only I could be like them. If only I could do what they do. If only I could, make the money that they make, and on and on and on. I think we've all been there at one time or another. I probably shared with you, but when I was growing up, basketball was really the sport that I gravitated to. And I remember that day I was in my uncle's house walking by the television, the early 1980s, and I see this basketball game going on, the Los Angeles Lakers versus I don't know who it was, and just watching this guy make these unbelievable passes, these unbelievable shots. This number 32, who is this guy? And from that moment on, he becomes my favorite player, Magic Johnson. Later in life, he made some very poor decisions in his personal life. And I, as a young guy, trying to understand the balance, I just like him for basketball. Do I really like him for this? But for years, I tried to model my game after him. I'm 5'0", he's 6'9". That's not going to match up. I'm working these little baby hooks. I'm trying these no-look passes like he did. I've got my little sisters out there. Hit the one in the nose one time, but most of them didn't even come close. I didn't master that no-look stuff. I don't do very well not looking. But we do that. We idolize people because of who they are and what they are, and it can rob us of our contentment. Jesus is telling the crowd this. He's saying, you see these other people, and he uses these terms 2 different times. He says, don't do as they do. Don't be like they are. Because he knew that everybody wanted to be like them, the Pharisees. They had it all. They knew everything. They had the money. They were the MVPs of the day. He says, don't be like them. Don't compare yourselves to them. You probably noticed our worship leader's not here this morning. Tim, he feeling pretty sick. Thank goodness his wife is not, and she's with us. We don't know. He was like shaking and convulsing, and we were making up stuff in our production meeting, so we're hoping that he feels better. But last week, he had the privilege to go to a worship conference in Ohio, and one of the speakers there, Phil Wing, said this. He said, the Bible never gives a view of excellence that is in comparison to other people. That's a powerful statement. So true. So no performance can lead to no pressure through our pace of life, through the platform, and through pedestals that we put people on. And thirdly, it can be through the idea of perfectionism. I mean, think about this. So many of us want that persona to be just perfect. I want everybody to think that everything is perfect in my life. My looks, the way my life, my kids, my family, my house, everything is in order, and we put on this persona. Some of you are like that. I fall into that sometimes. We use the platforms that we talked about a moment ago of social media to get that out there, that everybody can see the good in us. Their identity can be in that. Our image is not unscathed. And what takes place is this emotional equilibrium. It continues to go up and down based on people's response to our perceived perfection. We know we're not perfect. They know we're not perfect. But it's all about how we project it and what we project. Paul talks about the dangers of self-consumption in Romans 12. He says, don't think you are better than you really are, but be honest in your evaluation of yourselves. This is where Jesus is warning those on that mountainside. This is where the Pharisees are failing. They're not evaluating themselves the right way. They're not looking back and seeing things that they've done and where they need to go. They say the right things, hang with the right people, go to the right places, possess the right items. What Jesus is saying, their heart is not there. It's not in it. And only if they would do this self-evaluation, if they would just take their life under review, if you will. Now, if you follow the sports world, basketball, baseball, hockey, everything, and football, especially football, you'll know the term under review. Steeler fans, we really don't like that term right now, do we? But it's this idea of, like in football, something happens and one of the coaches thought it should have been called the other way. He throws out this red flag, and then they all come together. The referee goes under what they call the hood. Used to be a hood. I don't know what it is now. And they're looking at the play and seeing, is it right? Is it wrong? Do we overturn it? Does it stand? And the whole play is under review. Jesus is saying, if only the Pharisees would do that. I want to transition just for a few moments to a guy who actually did that. He took his life under review, and he wrote about it in the Old Testament in the book of Ecclesiastes. And there's this guy who's David's son. His name is Solomon. And he does exactly that. He's looking at his life, taking it under review. And I think if he was here today with you and I, he would ask us to do the same thing. because we all need to take into review where we've been so that we can know where to go. We all need to look at where we've been, which gives us the ability to see where we need to go. Solomon is doing that in the book of Ecclesiastes. Let's just pick it up in verse 1. It says this: "These are the words of the teacher, King David's son, who ruled Jerusalem." And we stop there for just a moment. He doesn't even give his name, but we can tell by just that sentence, and if we go further into chapter 1 and 2, we know that this is Solomon. But here's what's so important, is for us to know who wrote it so that we can understand it a little bit better. Have you ever gotten that text? It's like a paragraph long, a really long paragraph, and you have no idea because the number just comes up, it doesn't have a name, and you don't know what in the world they're talking about. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. And then you kind of think about it, pray about it, whatever, and you realize, oh, Mom, and then it all makes sense. You know exactly what she's talking about, right? And that's like this. We understand that this is Solomon, and it makes more sense why he says the things he does. Because we remember that this is a guy who wrote over 3,000 proverbs. He wrote 1,005 songs in the book Song of Songs. He oversaw the building of God's temple. Solomon had 700 wives and 300 girlfriends. What was that Valentine's Day like? I mean, can you imagine his palace? He's got a Sarah's Candy wing over here, and he's got a Hallmark wing over here. I mean, just a complete mess. But Solomon was trying to get his identity in all of these worldly things. And he goes on in verse 2. He says, "Everything is meaningless," says the teacher. Completely meaningless. If you're old school and you're a King James only person, it will say vanity of vanities. Everything is vanity. Either way, this is used roughly 39 times in the book, so you know it's important to Solomon, and he takes his life under review here. Now, it's really hard to put the original Hebrew word into the English word. This is really the best we can do it, but the Hebrew word here is hevel. It's meaning vapor or breath, puff of smoke. It's those days like this morning when you go outside and you breathe and you see it and it's gone. And that's what Solomon's talking about here. And probably James chapter 4, that's where he gets this when he talks about our life is like a vapor. It's here and then it's gone, and compared to eternity. But we've got to understand and not misinterpret what Solomon is saying. He's not saying that life has no purpose, because that would completely contradict the conclusions he comes to throughout the book. He's not saying that. He's not trying to lead us to despair, but what Solomon's trying to do is give us some perspective. Okay? So keep that in mind. He's trying to give us some perspective. He goes on in verse 3. What do people get for all of their hard work under the sun? That term, under the sun, another term that's going to be used over and over and over throughout that book. And basically what he's saying here, these are our calendars, these are our Google calendars, our everyday lives, our routines. Some of us love routine. We work best in a routine. We know exactly what's going to happen morning, afternoon, evening, night. We get up and we do it all over again. We work well that way. If it gets altered in any way, that can really throw some of us off. You know, we just get completely out of whack, messed up. And Solomon's saying, I've done that. And what is it getting me? He goes on. What do people get from all their hard work under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth never changes. The sun rises and the sun sets, then hurries around and rises again. The wind blows south and then it turns north. Around and around and around it goes, blowing in circles. Rivers run into the sea, but the sea is never full. Then waters return, and the rivers and flows out again into the sea. Everything is wearisome beyond description. No matter how much we see, we are never satisfied. No matter how much we hear, we are never content. History merely repeats itself. And look at this. It says, it has all been done before. Nothing under the sun is truly new. Sometimes people say, here's something new, but actually it's old. Nothing is ever truly new. We don't remember what happened in the past and the future generations, and here again, no one will remember what we are doing now. Basically, Solomon is saying this, that there will be generations before us that we won't really remember who they were or what they did. There will be generations after us that won't remember who we are or what we did. And this generation is, talk of these generations, as C.S. Lewis calls, chronological snobbery. This idea that we've got it all together and we can fix all the wrongs that the previous generation did. And then the generations after us are going to think the same way. They can fix all the problems that we created. And it goes on and on and on, over and over and over. Solomon's saying, they're not going to remember all that. You've all been to viewings and funerals, and it's important that we grieve well and we talk and we reminisce and we just all the good stuff about this person and what they did and how great they were and stuff. But we all know eventually we will not remember, we'll forget, and we'll move on. Not wrong or right, it's just natural. It's going to happen. Mark Twain puts it a little more bluntly. He said, the world will lament you for an hour and forget you forever. I'm sure I worded it that way, but there's some truth to that. Solomon's trying to give us some perspective. But now he gets a little bit more specific. Look at verse 13. He says, changes gears. He said, I devoted myself to search for understanding, to explore by wisdom everything being done under heaven. We know from 1 Kings that he was one of the smartest, wisest men ever. And God even asked him, what do you want? What can I give you? Solomon says, I just want wisdom. I just want knowledge. And in 1 Kings, it says, I will give you, God says, I will give you what you asked for. I will give you wise and understanding hearts such as no one else has had, past tense, or ever will have, present tense. Now, I'm pretty convinced that we have some very smart people here with us today. But can I just tell you that compared to Solomon, you're not even in the same ballpark, probably not even in the same city, because he is so much smarter than we are. I mean, if it was Jeopardy, he would win every time. His SAT scores would be aced every single time. He was a smart dude. And then he says, look where it got me. Verse 16. I said to myself, look, I'm wiser than any of the kings who ruled in Jerusalem before me. I have greater wisdom and knowledge than any of them. So I set out to learn everything from wisdom to madness to folly, but I learned firsthand and that pursuing all of this is like chasing the wind. The greater my wisdom, the greater my grief, and to increase knowledge only increases sorrow. By learning as much as he could, he felt that he could get all the fulfillment, meaning, and purpose, and he could find it in knowledge. Find his identity. And this is what he realized, that my identity, part of my identity was in knowledge, accruing more, chasing it, running after it. And what did he conclude? He was chasing something that he could really grasp. He couldn't really grasp. And he says it's like chasing the wind. You're running after it. You're trying to run it down. You finally get to it. You put your arms around it, and it's gone. He put his identity in knowledge. And then he said, well, then I tried something else. Look at chapter 2, verse 1. He says, I said to myself, he's like having this conversation with himself. You ever do that? People think we're weird. Solomon was, maybe he's the one who started it. He said, I said to myself, come, let's try pleasure. Let's look for good things in life. But I found that this too was meaningless. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to a party, but I can tell you have never been to a party like Solomon threw. It is, a lot of historians would say that there was an excess of 15,000 people at his palace on any given day. We read about that in 1 Kings. All the food and everything took place, all the chocolates and the Hallmark cards. I mean, there was just a lot going on. There was a massive party at Solomon's palace. And yet he says, I found this to be meaningless. His identity was in good times, lots of people. And for the sake of time, we won't read all this, but in chapter 2, then he goes on and he talks about wealth. He accrued all this wealth. He says, I built houses, plural. I had all these vineyards, all the water to supply to them. I had all the cattle I needed, servants, gold, silver, everything. He said, I had more than anyone in Jerusalem before me, and it was greater than anyone before me. His identity became wealth. It became more work. And basically we can sum it up this way in Solomon's life, what he's saying. He's like, if I could smoke it, shoot it, slam it, sip it, or sleep with it, that's where I found my satisfaction. And a lot of us kind of are in that same boat, or can pick and choose from some of these, that we just, our lives, we want it to be out there that everything's good. We want to acquire what we can. We need those clothes that make us look good. We need this car. We need this job. We need this promotion. We need this friendship. If we just get it, we'll find our purpose. We struggle, and Solomon's not trying to depress us, but he's trying to change our focus. Like him, what everything was right in front of him that when you reach out and see, he's trying to get us to focus above that. look up, find our identity in something different. And what's interesting is, and I don't want to stand up here and say, having nice things, having fun, getting a good job that we can really enjoy and finding satisfaction in that. I don't want to say that's necessarily bad. It's not. Because it's interesting how Solomon concludes this. Look at the end of this in chapter 2. He says this, "So I decided there's nothing better than to enjoy food and drink and to find satisfaction in work." But look at this. He said, "But I realized that these pleasures are from the hand of God. For who can eat, enjoy anything apart from him?" It's like he's saying having knowledge, enjoying ourselves, finding satisfaction in our jobs, things that we love to do. All of these things are good things in and of themselves. But when we turn them into ultimate things, when we try to find fulfillment, purpose, and meaning in them alone, it's going to dissipate right in front of our eyes. Like a vapor, just like the wind, we chase them down, we try to wrap our arms around it, and they're gone. And what he's saying is the key here to acknowledge the author of those things. God gave us those things. He gave us pleasure. He gave us the ability to work. He's saying, don't just chase after them apart from me. And again, make sure we don't misinterpret this. Solomon's not trying to discourage us, but he's trying to get us to see beyond the S-U-N. And not just putting our head down and chasing whatever we can, but recognize that there's an eternity that can guide us, a purpose through eternity that we need to move towards, and that there is a God above the S-U-N who gave his S-O-N to come down underneath the S-U-N to give us the meaning, purpose, and fulfillment that we need to live a life that he's created us to live. Don't let that be our identity. Focus upward. Solomon says, we go back to where we started here this morning. Jesus is trying to do the same thing with those people on that mountainside that day. When he's saying, don't be like them. Don't let all the persona of this, they can acquire all this, their knowledge, wealth, and everything else, drive you to be somebody that I've not created you to be. Look what he says in Matthew 15. Group of people around him just like us, struggles like us, and he says, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Their worship is farce, for they teach man-made ideas and commands from God. I've shared this before, and you know that when I preach up here, I'm just preaching real life. I hope you know that. I hope I've made that very clear. I'm not preaching something that I'm not struggling with. It is things that I'm probably struggling with a lot more than you all are. And so I'm just preaching real life using biblical references and examples. And I've said before, and I feel so strongly about this, especially in this area of my life, of having that person or persons that can really speak into me. That person that I can trust, that can bring me up when I'm down, that can pull me down when I get a little bit too high. Do you have those people in your life? People like this. I found this picture just this week on the internet, a beautiful example of love. I mean, greater love has no man than this, to make himself a step stool so another one can use the bathroom. I mean, this is love, right? I mean, the guy's helping his buddy do something that he can't do on his own. How important it is to have those people that love and care for you that much in your life speak into you. Solomon spoke from personal experiences. Jesus knew that, and he's speaking to the people on the mountainside, present day stuff. Your identity is not what's right in front of you, it's what's above you. And so I leave you with this. Fill in the blank. If I could only get more of, then life would be better. If I could only get more of, then life would be better. Now, understand that you fill in that blank, it's got to be followed by a question. It just does. And here's the question. Now what? I got that relationship I always wanted. Now what? I got those clothes that I've been saving up for months and months and months. Now what? I got that promotion that I just knew if I only got that, it would give me the financial stability that I would need. Now what? Now what? I got that thing I was running after, chasing like the wind, and I got it. I grabbed it. Now what? Jesus says, what if you have me? What if you have me? What What if your identity is in me? What if you slow down long enough for me to reveal myself to you? What if you recognize that all the performance was done by my son? We celebrate here in a few moments. What if you grasp that? What if you know that the debt's been paid? My son did all the work. He died. He rose again. The grave couldn't hold him. He did it all. Now what? The promise of eternity, Christ in me, the hope of glory. Recognize that I don't have to perform. There is no pressure. Jesus did it all. Thank you, Lord Jesus, for that promise this morning, that you did it all. And that our identity right here, right now in the present, is to be focusing upward on the S-U-N, your Son, who gave his life for us. Thank you, Jesus.